They just don't make things like they used to. We hear this phrase all the time, in the context of everything you can imagine from home appliances, homes, and of course, cars. You would think that in the age of the internet and mass production, that companies and manufacturers would be looking to improve the quality of the products that we buy, but it actually seems as though the exact opposite is really happening. And while I can't speak to the quality degradation of our houses or the appliances within them, because let's face it, I'm not an appliance expert, in the case of cars though, no, it's not your imagination, car quality is actually getting worse. According to a J.D. Power study done last year, quality of new vehicles sold in the United States is declining as factors such as growing use of technology and lower build quality of certain parts are making the models more problematic. Now, this J.D. Power study is a bit old news as the study was done last year, but stay with me because it is relevant to this video. This report, which was done in June of 2023, was the first time ever in 28 years that we've seen 2 consecutive year-over-year declines in consumer satisfaction whenever it comes to cars. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, consumers are unhappy with the overall product quality of their vehicles, but also the technology within them, more specifically the infotainment setup within their cars. It seems as though vehicle owners are overall unhappy with the performance of the native vehicle infotainment systems, with 56% of the respondents of the survey saying that this is their predominant pain point. And according to this same study, vehicle owners just prefer to use things like Android Auto or Apple CarPlay rather than the native system like Dodge Uconnect or Toyota Intune, for example. And what are automakers doing in response to this? Well, if you're GM, you just get rid of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, because who cares what the customer wants? But don't worry, it's actually for our safety. And don't even get me started on the overall build quality of vehicles as well, which again is another pain point of consumers. This is a topic that I've talked about in past videos over years, and it's something that a lot of YouTubers in general discuss quite frequently. The reality is the build quality of new and modern vehicles just really isn't that good, and this is especially true with cars that are priced in that $20,000 to $50,000 price range. But it's even effective in cars that are priced much higher than that. This is evident with things like painfully squeaky interiors, panel gaps, and just overall cheap materials. And while these grievances certainly are valid and they absolutely are being noticed by consumers, these problems really pale in comparison to the current recall situation, which is out of control. Just this week, these are the recalls that have been announced. Tesla recalled 200,000 vehicles due to a software issue that causes the backup camera to go dark. Toyota announced a 50,000 vehicle recall due to a deadly airbag. GM also recalled 11,000 vehicles for the same airbag issue. Mazda has recalled the CX-90 for sudden loss of power steering, and Ford has recalled 1.9 million Explorers because trim pieces are flying off. And that's just this week, 1 week. But in 2023, Honda had over 6.3 million vehicles that were affected by recall, the most of any manufacturer. Ford was number 2 with just over 6.15 million, Kia with 3.1, Chrysler with 7.3, General Motors with 2 million, Nissan with 1.8, Mercedes with quite a bit lower with only 478,000, Volkswagen 453,000, BMW 340,000, and Daimler 261,000. And though Honda has the highest number of vehicles that are affected by recalls, Ford actually had the largest number of recalls issued in 2023 with 54 recalls. And the most common reasons for recalls include, in order, electrical systems, equipment, structure, powertrain, steering, airbags, exterior lighting, suspension, service brakes, hydraulic system, backover prevention. Between 2002 and 2012, the average number of recalls per year was 17.2 million. But between 2013 and 2023, that number went up by 110% to 36 million per year on average. This is a substantial increase, and while we do see some years whenever it comes to recalls that are much higher than others, for example, in 2020, we saw a record number of recalls, while in 2023, we saw that number come down. Overall, the trends are trending in the direction that recalls are increasing overall year over year. And the comment that I hear often whenever there is a discussion about recalls is that recalls is just part of the process. Whenever automakers release a vehicle, you probably should expect that there will be recalls associated with that vehicle, and that's just a part of life. But the truth is, it really shouldn't be. Because the reality of the situation is that whenever it comes to recalls, there is a substantial number of vehicle owners that have vehicles that have recalls that have yet to get those recalls actually remedied. And thus, these people are driving around in vehicles that could theoretically be less safe to not only the person who's driving, but also other people on the road as well. There is an annual report released by the NHTSA every single year. And while we don't have the 2023 data quite yet, it should be released in the spring, so just in a couple of months, we do have the most recent NHTSA report, which was released in spring of 2022. And you can see that over the years, the amount of recalls that are actually getting remedied is actually declining. This was at 72.9% in 2018, which was at its peak, versus in recent years where it's declined to 52%, meaning only about half of all recalls that are being issued are actually being addressed. At the same time, the amount of do not drive or park outside recalls, so the particularly dangerous ones, are increasing substantially over the years as well. So automakers are issuing more and more of these severe recalls that could potentially harm people and property and cause some severe damage, and simultaneously people are getting recalls fixed less often. And while I don't think any of us know exactly why this is the case, I know that I definitely have my theories. And I believe that one of the reasons why we've seen such a decrease in the amount of recalls that are actually getting remedied ultimately has to do with the amount of recalls that are being announced. People are constantly reading articles, watching videos, getting mailers about recalls that are getting announced on different vehicles. And I think that whenever people see this, they just see, okay, my car has a recall, whatever. And people just don't really care. I have the perfect instance for this. Now, many of you know that I'm a Turo host. I have 30 cars on the Turo platform, and I have 3 cars that have been out from the Turo platform sitting due to a recall. You see, in the United States, it's actually illegal to rent out a car that has an open recall. And so on Turo, whenever a recall is announced on a vehicle, Turo actually unlists that vehicle, preventing anybody from renting it until the recall can be addressed. And so back in September, this happened with my Hyundai Sonata, my Hyundai Tucson, and my Kia Rio. And unfortunately for me, this recall by Hyundai and Kia has no fix. So my cars have been sitting since September because I don't have anything to do with them, and they can't be rented out on the Turo platform. Now, the recall that is affecting my Hyundai Tucson specifically is a fire risk recall, which means that my Hyundai Tucson has a higher likelihood of catching on fire compared to other vehicles. And Hyundai is actually advising customers to park their cars outside due to this recall. Well, my sister has this exact same type of Hyundai Tucson, and whenever this recall was announced, I remember telling her, hey, you have a recall. You may want to think about parking outside because there's fire risk. And her response was, I don't care. It's not going to catch on fire anyways. And I can absolutely guarantee you that if I wasn't my sister's sibling, that she would absolutely never get that recall addressed. Of course, I'll make sure that she does, but if I wasn't there to do it, it 100% would just go unremedied. And the thing is, I think people like my sister are not the minority in this situation. I think that they are the majority. And because of the fact that people are hearing about recalls all the time, they just have grown to not really care about them. And even recalls that are deemed as dangerous and a safety risk are ultimately not a big deal to consumers. Again, nothing hard and factual here, but this is definitely my theory, and I think it's ultimately why people aren't really getting recalls addressed, and I think it could end up causing some major issues later on down the road. And by vehicle owners not getting their cars fixed, this ultimately ends up saving dealerships and automakers money long term, which really kind of gives them less incentive to try to fix the recall situation moving forward on other vehicles. The point I'm trying to make here is that vehicle quality is definitely a growing issue, and I know that I personally quite often get concerned about the longevity of modern vehicles because between technology, software, and build quality, I just think that there's a chance that the days of driving a car for 20 plus years, if it's well taken care of, well, those days may be over. Because I think that some cars on the road today just really aren't made to last. And unfortunately, I think that this will end up leading us to have to replace our cars more often, just like we have to replace home appliances. Not because we want to, but because we have to. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.